Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at My Expat Taxes. For my fellow Americans out there, we all know tax season is upon us, and for anyone who's ever had the pleasure of dealing with multiple tax agencies in multiple countries, you know this can be a challenging experience. That's why when it comes to dealing with anything tax-related abroad, I always recommend hiring a pro to help you navigate this unknown space. In my experience, this not only saves you time and spares you from the unnecessary headaches, it also has literally saved me thousands of dollars in taxes over the years. So I am super excited to introduce you to My Expat Taxes, a true pro in this space that focuses 100% on U.S. expat taxes. Whether you're filing for 2023, catching up on back taxes, predicting a future tax obligation for a future move abroad, or just looking for some guidance, My Expat Taxes has your back with speedy and affordable online filing options and real human accountants to assist you as needed. Join the more than 16,000 other Americans living abroad who have used their services by visiting myexpattaxes.com via the link in the show notes. My guest today is my new friend, Nathan, who is a fellow American that made his way over to Italy officially 4 years ago when he settled down there. But as we come to find out, he's been traveling to Italy and spending significant time there for the last 10 to 20 years, depending on how you look at it. So he knows Italy very well. And to take it even a step further, he's the host of the I'm Moving to Italy podcast, where he interviews other expats and foreigners who have made a life for themselves in Italy. So the guy knows everything that there is to know about Italy, and we dive into as much of it as we possibly can in this episode, touching on some of the hidden gems that you'll find throughout Italy, especially some of those that you might get to if you're getting off the tourist track, and a few tips and tricks for those of you interested in following in his footsteps and making a life for yourself in Italy. If you listened to last week's episode, you know that they have just introduced a digital nomad visa, and we also touch on a few tax advantages that Italy offers as well. But mostly we just dive into Nathan's story and how he has managed to build a beautiful life for himself in the Prosecco Hills of Veneto. So please help me in welcoming Nathan to About Abroad. Is everything all right over there, Nathan? Yeah, we're rolling, man. Let's we're doing this. Hailstorm and all you got going on there in Italy.
Yeah, I mean, we just started recording 5 minutes ago, and just as we started talking, all this hail started coming down. It's like one of these crazy northern Italian storms that we have here, and we haven't had one for quite a while. I kind of forgot how crazy they can be.
For everyone listening in the audience, we are powering through this for you. I mean, this is Nathan just pulling through for you all because he lives in one of the most desirable places in the world. I was lucky enough to spend a good bit of time nearby recently. We discovered each other, two people that love to travel, coming from the other side of the pond, really enjoying life in Italy. And we figured we gotta get him on About Abroad to tell the story and to explore Italy a little bit, because it truly is a magical place. And you know that. I think Italy needs no introduction. It's a one of those top tier places that people from around the world want to go visit. But I think there's something really special about calling it your home and getting past those tourist traps that everybody gets to, once in their life if they're interested in traveling to Italy. But I think you've built a really beautiful life for yourself there, and I'm super excited to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is really, really fun because for the last almost 4 years now, I've been doing my podcast, and I've never been on this side of the microphone where someone's interviewing me. I've always been on the other end of things. So this is really great. I love your podcast. I've been really just kind of absorbing it and taking it episode by episode since I discovered it. And you have such a great way of connecting with your guests, and you really draw their stories out. And you just also have a great way of choosing interesting people with interesting stories to be on your show. So thanks for having me be here. This is my first time on anyone else's podcast. So I wouldn't
Wow.
want it to be with anyone else. So thank you, Chase.
Man, I'm honored by that. That's super kind. Thank you. And likewise, I've been binging your show as well, especially once I had discovered we had some mutual connections in this space, and just like, and after, for me, like I've been through Italy quite a bit, and spent a decent amount of time there over the years, but in short stints. And then I sort of stumbled across Italy long term this past year. Long term meaning like, several months. And I really kind of dug a little bit deeper into it and felt like this is a place that I could actually, like, I always thought of it as a place I could travel to and go see some sights and stuff and check some bucket list items off. But I realized, like, this is a wonderful place to call home, actually. And it was at that point that I discovered your show, where you're literally, I mean, I'm moving to Italy. Like, everybody that you're talking to has made the move or is making the move to Italy. And their stories are also unique because I'm pretty sure, I mean, this could be argued, I guess, but like, Italy is, in my mind, one of the most diverse countries that you have in Europe. And so everybody's story, when you talk to them, like, they're living totally different lives on different ends of Italy. And I think that's super cool.
I mean, I think you just said it very well. You were just in northern Italy, right? In the Dolomiti Mountains and also near God the Lake.
Yep, that's right.
So you were in a little bit. So you were in, of course, in the region of Trentino, Alto Adige, but then also in Veneto a little bit, which is the region where I live. I mean, I don't know how much of Italy you've been able to see yet in your travels, but they're almost unrecognizably different from northern Italy up near the Alps where you were, the Dolomiti Mountains, down to the islands like Sardinia and Sicily. They're like different worlds. So I think it's very, very accurate to say that it's a diverse country in everything from the dialects that are spoken. I mean, there's so many. Every single one of the 20 regions has its own dialect that's spoken there. So it's like a country with 20 different regions, and sometimes those regions have subdialects in them. And so it's just, and then the food changes a whole lot, and then also so do the people. So it's a surprisingly diverse place. It's not what I grew up thinking Italy was, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's what I discovered as well on this, because I think my previous trips to Italy had been what I expected. Like, you do the Venice and the Rome and the Florence and get out into Tuscany and maybe Cinque Terre, and like you maybe Sicily. So you're seeing the beaches and the Amalfi Coast. Like, these are landmark places that people from around the world know and want to get to, and they are what you expect they're going to be, and they're stunning and beautiful. They also come with a lot of tourists and some challenges in that way. But I mean, I recommend, like, they're places people should go see. But I just think, like, when you get up into, for example, where we were, Trentino or Veneto, that it feels like a place you can actually live and enjoy, like, a really high quality of life. Like you mentioned, the food goes without saying, right? Like, amazing food, but like super kind people. I think you have this nice combination. I'd be interested to hear if this is what you think, but like, I felt like you have this nice combination in northern Italy of, like, things work really well, like Central Europe, like, just as an example, like, buses show up on time, trains are really nice, show up on time. You go to a government office, it's like in and out, fairly quickly, as much as government offices can be that way. But at the same time, you still have that, like, Southern Europe, Mediterranean culture, kind of laid back. Let's have long lunches and enjoy our life. And that combination was very, I don't know, very welcoming for me, very comforting, I guess.
I think it's very true. It's something that I've certainly noticed. It's interesting how your perspective changes too while you're here, because I'm married to a native Italian who's from southern Italy, who's a little bit prejudiced actually against these northern Italians. And because the Northern Italians have a little bit of they have a little bit within Italy. Okay, so if you're just taking Italy and you're just talking Italy, Northern Italians have a reputation of being the uptight Italians,
Yeah.
the the ones that are less friendly, less warm and welcoming. And I think for Americans, we are just naturally kind of warm people. Like that's kind of
Mhm.
what's what we're kind of known for. We're known for other things too, of course, but we're known for being pretty friendly. And so I think when you come to northern Italy with that sense, and I think that if you compare northern Italians to, let's say, Germans or Norwegians or other Nordic countries, or, you definitely can tell a difference. But but there's definitely I think there's an advantage to being an American in northern Italy because you kind of draw the people out naturally. You draw out their warmth, whereas maybe in southern Italy, I feel like it just kind of it's already there. They're already
Yeah.
starting off with warmth and openness and kind of I don't know. I don't even know if what I'm saying is making any sense, but basically, you're right. Northern Italy works really well. I find it to be really beautiful. I like the weather and I like the people. And this is the only part of Italy that I've actually lived in. In fact, here in the Prosecco Hills, which is about 20 minutes or so from Venice, just kind of an unknown area for a lot of people. A lot of people don't, they'll know about Venice, but they won't know about the Prosecco region where Prosecco is made. And I love the fact that this is not really on a lot of people's radar. It's certainly not on the tourist radar. Austrians and Germans and Northern Europeans tend to know about this area and they like to come and do some wine tasting and kind of visit this area, but it's not really on the map for a lot of people, which is really lovely. And then where you were up in the mountains, up in the Dolomiti Mountains, you know, that area is also not really touristy as far as like you're not going to get the same bus loads of tourists. I'm sure you
Yeah.
encountered it feeling less touristy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it was kind of a bit shocking, I think, at first to be in Italy, and to be in a very beautiful, like we were in Trento, right? Which is like a beautiful little city. Like if you just see pictures or videos of Trento, I mean, you'd be like, why does nobody know about this place? But I never once saw a bus of tourists, walking around taking pictures of everything, and it's just people just living there, but surrounded by some of the most natural beauty you could imagine. And still like enough, like a little city there with stuff going on. And I found it to be an incredible hopping off point. Like I would tell people would say like, should I come visit Trento? And I'm like, look, Trento is not the most spectacular, like if you got other places you need to see first. But if you're looking for a great home base for a couple months or something, I mean, you're 1 hour, you're deep into the Dolomites for some epic skiing or snowboarding, if that's what you want to do. You're 2 hours to Innsbruck, Austria, and all that you have to do there. You're an hour from Lake Garda, an hour from Venice, from Verona, which feels like classic Mediterranean Italy, right? So like 1 hour to the north, you feel like you're in Austria. 1 hour to the south, you're in like classic Italy. You got Venice close by, like there's just a lot. It's an amazing like day trip jumping off point. And that was a cool thing to discover because I totally discovered it by accident and had no idea that I was going to be ending up in this pretty sweet situation. So yeah, it's a hidden gem.
Yeah, I really love that city as well. There's that beautiful river that flows right through the middle of the city. You can walk along that river, and it's got that there's a really really good. Did you go to the museum, the Natural History Museum there?
No, I didn't actually.
There's the next time you're
There's
there.
still a lot to discover.
Oh yeah, there's the next time you're there, you should check out they've got a really great natural history museum with all kinds of animals and just everything related to natural history. It's really really a great spot, but it's a great city and just the entire region. I was there just last month myself with some friends from Tennessee that came to visit, and
Nice.
they uh, they they loved it. You know, there was still snow on those peaks, and it was beautiful. And we went to my friend's winery. If you're ever back up there, let me know. I'll hook you up with a really great winery to go visit. My friend Victoria and her husband Giulio have this winery called Cantina Martinelli, and they're young winemakers who kind of inherited this piece of land and these old buildings, and they brought this winery back. And over the past 10 years, they've been making wine there. But besides wine and hiking, there's a ton of apples that grow there.
Yeah.
Were you there during apple season at all?
I arrived in I arrived to Lake Garda in September and to Trento in October, and then
Perfect.
was there for 6 months. Yeah.
So you got do you like apples? Because that's like apple capital of Italy.
You know what? I'm kind of embarrassed to say I didn't know that, and I don't think I recognize that. But in fairness, I arrived and it was like I was kind of blown away because there was a big like autumn festival going on. They also had, I don't know what it's called. Maybe you can tell me, but I thought this, I was like nerding out on this. They had the festival, like kind of the like welcoming of all the farm animals, which they were like bringing down from the mountains for the winter. And like everybody, there's like a big parade that goes through all the towns. And I'm sure you know about this, but people are thinking like, what is this? I thought the same thing. There was just like so much happening in the, when we first arrived that I was kind of like I felt like I was taking in a lot, and I thought I was going to this like little sleepy town, and it totally was not the case.
Yeah, well, first of all, that's the other thing about Italy, that one of the many things about Italy that I love. And no, I don't. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. And it's very common to not really know about certain things that happen in another region, because not only is that region, as you found out, a part of the region of Trentino Alto Adige is kind of almost two little regions in one. It's the
Hmm.
Alto Adige region, where they section of the region where they speak German, and
Yep.
then it's the Trentino region where they speak Italian still. And so there's a lot of traditions in every single region of Italy. And then in every town within that region, they have their own traditions. They have their own festivals that, if you don't know that, if you don't have family or friends from there and you've never been there during that time of the year, you just won't know about them. And so there's like something to discover no matter where you are in Italy. And it's rich, and they haven't lost their culture. And that's one of the things about the United States, that because we are such a melting pot, we don't really have those specific regional. I mean, we do. I mean, every town has their own parades and stuff like that in the United States, but it's just not quite as baked into the culture for such a, in the same way that it is here. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's on a different level. Like, I mentioned this farm animal thing. Like this was like an out like if you were blindfolded and dropped into this, you would be like, "Oh, I'm definitely in the Swiss Alps. This is like some Heidi stuff, where there's like people in Bavarian garb coming down out of the hills with their sticks and their sheep, and there's a big festival in the town and flowers and a big party, like basically welcoming all the animals." You'd be like, yeah, this is definitely like the Swiss or Austrian Alps. But it's like, no, you're in Italy. And you'd be like, hold on, no, sorry. Italy's like Mediterranean and, colorful buildings. And this doesn't look like Italy. And it's like, no, this is very much so this part of Italy. And it's so distinct that's what makes it super cool. I mean, in general, that's kind of what I don't know if this is the same for you, but this is sort of what I fell in love with about Europe when I first started traveling around the world. And like, I kept coming back to Europe because I was like, I really love that you can just pop into these different countries and get different experiences. But then once I started living over here, I realized like I was living in Spain, and I think to a lesser degree, it's also this way in Spain where like you get into different regions and it's like, oh wait, totally different language, legitimately a different language or a very strong dialect difference, different culture, totally different from what you'd expect in terms of like landscapes and natural beauty. And you're like, this is all in like, this is like 2 hours from this other place that's totally different. Like that, this is mind blowing to me, and it's very stimulating. Like it keeps life exciting. It's a bit addicting too.
No, it really is, especially if you have a personality that likes change and likes variety, and clearly you do. I just kind of like being somewhere with rich traditions, and you know that every year at this time this is what's going to happen. Like, you know, it took me 2 years of being in Italy before I realized that the town where I lived had a tractor parade. And I mean, this is really the city that I live in is Conegliano, which is one of the Prosecco Hill cities where they produce Prosecco. It's one of the most famous of like three cities in the area, three or four cities that produce Prosecco, and it's very agricultural here, and so
Mm.
you very regularly get behind a tractor while you're driving through town, and during the crush and when they're picking the grapes in the harvest, there's just rows of tractors pulling giant trailers filled and overflowing with these Galeta white Galeta grapes, which are the grapes they use in making prosecco. And so all those farmers that live in the area, they all gather together, and once a year, I think it's sometime in June. It hasn't happened yet this year. I think it's in June that they do it. And they just take over the whole town, and the whole town is just nothing but tractors and farmers and farm kids driving these tractors through town. So it's just everywhere you are, there's something new. And yeah, I'm with you. I think it's really one of the things that makes living in Europe really special. And in Italy, it's totally like that no matter where you are. It's really, really cool. You know, the thing that makes northern Italy, where you were, really kind of feel like you're in somewhere other than Italy is because that all used to be Austria, as I'm sure you probably know. That
Right.
all used to be part of the Austrian empire at one point. I think it was called the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and until the wars and everything kind of split things up, like that wasn't even Italy for the longest time. So there's parts of northern Italy that used to be France, that used to be uh, Austria, and so the architecture is forever different there. And those people, they're actually less Italian than they are, whatever they used to be, which whether it's French or Austrian. So it makes for a very interesting mix.
It 100% does. Yeah, there was such a funny like experience that I had when I went from Trento up to Bolzano, and it's just like 45 minutes by train, I think, maybe 1 hour drive or less. And but you know in Trento, which is in, for this, but for anyone listening, they may know, like Trento's in the region called Trentino, and Bolzano is in Sud Tirol. And so these two back up to each other, but the two regions kind of collectively make, correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan, they collectively make what's known as Trentino Alto Adige. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's the part that used to be Austrian. And so, but when you get a little bit further north towards Austria, like if you again, like if you just got dropped blindfolded and dropped there, you'd think you were in Austria. Like people are speaking German predominantly. Road signs are in both languages. But it feels more like you're in Austria than it feels like you're in Italy. And at the same time, again, like I feel like you get this perfect fusion of the two, because there's pros to both sides of that, and like the fusion of the two is super interesting and like and a lot of fun. And I think so this has been my thing. Like you've been living in the Prosecco Hills, which by the way is just such a cool thing to say. Like I want to say that at some point in my life. I just live in the Prosecco Hills. Do you feel cool saying that? Like, do you know that that's cool?
Well, I have to admit, it sounds good saying it, but it feels even better living it. Like, for example, before
Yeah.
this crazy hailstorm that just came out of nowhere and knocked out our power for a little bit here, it was a beautiful day, a beautiful, clear day. And I go on two pretty long walks every day. The first walk I do in the morning if I can get out of the house in the morning and go for my walk. Otherwise, I go after lunch. But my first walk of the day is up through a whole bunch of these vineyards up to this kind of one of the high hills in our town. And I have this lookout point in this vineyard where I just kind of look out towards the Alps and just across the Prosecco Valley and over the hills. And I just never, ever get tired of it. And then the second walk I do is in the evening, which is up to our local castle here, which I've gotten kind of used to saying, I go for a walk up to the castle every night. And when I say that to people, they kind of look at me like, are you trying to make it sound really amazing and cool? Or do you know that that's not so normal? And I don't take it for granted, but you do start getting used to it. You start getting used to the fact that you just walked up to the vineyards, and then, in the evening, you're going to go for a walk up to the castle with these amazing views. So I don't think I'll ever get tired of it. And we have an apartment here. So my partner, who's Italian, Alessandro, his family all moved up here from Naples. And so they all ended up, it started with one family member getting a job here because there's a lot more work up in northern Italy. And then the grandparents moved, and then another aunt and uncle moved. And the next thing you know, they're owning businesses and they're all up here together. So now all of his family is up here in northern Italy, here in the Prosecco Hills as well. And they all live here in the city. And so we have a place here, but this is probably not going to be our forever home here in Italy. This is just going to be, I shouldn't say our, I don't even know how to say it. It's just going to be one of our places, but it's probably not where we're going to spend the most time. That's probably a better way to say it. But I love it here.
Do you have your eyes on another place in particular? Like, is there a region that really calls to you?
Yes, there is. And it's taken me a long time. Nothing I do in life ever seems to be very fast. I don't, I mean, for some reason, I've always been kind of like slow. Even my mom told me when I was really young, I remember her telling me, Nathan, you're slow, but you're steady.
It's like a compliment and like a little bit of like a backhanded compliment.
I think she meant it like you make progress, but you're consistent about it, but you're not fast about it. So, and that's I think that's kind of true. I think our mothers know us probably better than we know ourselves in some ways, but I wasn't expecting it to take this long to find a farm. I've been really looking for a farm. I grew up on a farm in California. My family are like fifth generation walnut, almond, and grape growers in California. So I grew up actually in a vineyard in Northern California. And so for me, I'm not a city person. This is the first time I've actually lived in a city here in this small city of Conegliano. And what I'm really looking for, and I think I've found after much searching and visiting multiple regions and trying to figure out which is going to be the best fit, I've narrowed it down to a couple different places. And my audience on my podcast are probably sick and tired of me talking about this farm that I'm supposedly buying. It always seems to be that I'm in this searching for this farm. But I've finally narrowed it down, I think, to two properties. One last year, I thought I had found the right place. And then before I was able to put an offer in on it, someone came in and put an offer on it, and then it sat under contract, as properties do often in Italy. It sat under contract for over 5 months, and then it finally did sell, because it's a very slow process to buy and sell in Italy. So that's something to keep in mind if you're planning to move here. But I have, because Alessandro's family is all from the region of Campania, which is the region where Naples is, the Amalfi Coast, and that whole area, Sorrento, that area. I wanted to not be in that region, but I wanted to be close to that region. And so one of the bordering regions is the Roman region of Lazio. So that's where I have decided is going to be the perfect fit. It's in this perfect balance of not truly all the way south in Italy, but it's definitely it's more southern certainly than where we are now. But you're close to Rome, you're close to Naples, and it seems like it's going to be a really good fit. Yeah, I'm really into growing plants and trees, and especially citrus trees, and so the weather up here in northern Italy is actually a little too harsh for a lot of different varieties of citrus. So you can grow a lot more down in Lazio near Rome, and so yeah, that's where it's probably going to be. Hopefully, this is going to be the year that that actually happens.
It looks like geographically, I actually had to look it up while you were talking. And it looks geographically like a very well positioned spot. I mean, you have a big, long coastline. You're right between Tuscany and Campania, as you said. So, like for people listening, I mean, you're talking about being right between Florence and Siena and all that. Tuscany's famous. It doesn't need much of an introduction. And then you've got Campania, where Naples and the Amalfi Coast and Pompeii and all of that is. So but you're in this space right there in between, meaning that you have that access to all that stuff, but and Rome, of course, not to mention. But you're not like smack dab in the middle of it all. Also,
Yeah, and the food, I think the food in that region is really good. Sometimes the northern food, people either love it or they don't love it. I personally think that northern Italian food, which tends to have a reputation for being a little heavier, there's more creaminess. There's things like polenta, and
mm-hmm.
there's a lot of risotto, and there's a little bit more of a heavy feel to again, it's a little more similar to like Austrian food. It would
Yeah.
be like if Austria and Italy sort of had mixed together and had a food baby. That would be the kind of food you get in this region. But the region of Lazio is really lovely because it's got influences of kind of central and southern and northern all kind of mixed in, which makes it really great. And I'm not, even though I'm a foreigner and I'm living in Italy, and I shouldn't have any kind of an attitude about tourists, because this is a great, and I don't. I mean, I think I completely understand why tourists want to come to Italy. I just I just feel like I wouldn't want to be in a real touristy area as someone who wants to live in Italy like a local. And the great thing about this particular region, which is again, it's called the region of Lazio, and one of the reasons I like that region is because it's not, other than Rome, it's not really on anybody's map. Like people
Yeah.
will fly into Rome, they'll spend a few days in Rome, and then they're off to, like you said, Cinque Terre or Naples or the Amalfi Coast or Tuscany or Florence. They don't really spend much time in the region of Rome besides the city of Rome. So it makes
Yeah.
it a kind of, I feel like, a really good choice for once you get out of the city, once you're 30 minutes outside of Rome, especially, or even an hour outside of Rome, there are ski resorts in the mountains that go through the center of Italy. It's just there's
Wow.
parts of this region that you would never ever guess are there.
We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at Lexity. I've lived abroad in various countries, and one common denominator I've found is that dealing with foreign bureaucracy is a nightmare. Trying to navigate visa and immigration waters in another language is not something I'd recommend ever trying on your own, even for the most experienced of us. So when I recently had to renew my Spanish visa again, I turned it over to the pros at Lexity. They've already helped more than 5,000 expats and digital nomads find a home and thrive in countries like Portugal, or in my case, Spain, also Italy, France, and Greece. Some very desirable locations indeed. So whether you're trying to obtain your first visa abroad, purchase a property, or work through international tax issues, Lexity's team of friendly lawyers is here to simplify your journey. The team is super knowledgeable, bilingual, and thorough, and I seriously cannot recommend their services enough. My experience working with them has been incredible, and I can honestly say I don't know that I would have EU permanent residency if it wasn't for the help of the team at Lexity. So if you're ready to make your move abroad, then Lexity is offering an exclusive discount to About Abroad listeners. Grab 10% off your first service with the code AboutAbroad2023 and learn more over at Lexity.com in the show notes and start your abroad journey today. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. We're dancing around something that I think is really interesting, which is like some of the, I guess I used this phrase earlier, so maybe we're not even dancing around it. We're just talking about it, but these hidden gems in Italy, right? Like, so Italy is one of those iconic countries that doesn't, that it's not hidden. People know a lot about Italy, right? But some of these regions that we're talking about, like Trentino and Veneto, and now we're talking about Lazio, like these are a little bit off the beaten path in a way. I mean, not really, but they're not top of mind for people. Do you have another region or city or like, another place that kind of like falls into this category that you recommend to friends or maybe you've talked about on your podcast? I have one in my mind that I can reference if you need to think about it or something, but I'm curious because a lot of people that listen to About Abroad, they are like seasoned travelers. They've spent a lot of time in places and they are looking for that next place to go spend a couple months. And often it is like one of the top priorities is like, I don't want to be in a tourist trap. Like I've done that, I'm looking for that next spot that feels a little bit more authentic, but is still spectacular in some way.
Well, that's a really good question. It's almost hard to answer because I have a lot of answers to that question. But I'll give you like maybe my top 5. One of the things that's been really great for me is, I was never someone who listened to podcast, and I certainly never thought I would have a podcast. So when I started the I'm Moving to Italy podcast, I did it because I couldn't find a podcast where somebody had talked about moving to Italy because that's what I was getting ready to do. And I was like, well, maybe someone else is going to be looking for, even if it's just one or two other people, somebody else is going to probably be doing the same thing as me at some point. And so I'm going to just start recording. So I did. And as I went through the seasons and the years went by, I got this idea to try to interview someone, because each one of my seasons is about 20 episodes long, and there are 20 regions in Italy. So last season, in season 6, I interviewed someone from each of Italy's 20 regions. And
cool.
Most of those people, probably, I think it turned out to be about 17 or 18 of those people were foreigners that had moved from some place, like most of them from the United States, but many of them from other places like Ireland and just other places. And they had moved and they had found that region where they were living, and they had discovered something about it that made it special. And every one of them, to a person, every single one of them shared with me things I did not know about that region and things I would have never known. And now I have 20 friends scattered all across Italy, at least one in every region now, which is for me, which feels like I hit the jackpot. And I feel really, really fortunate for that. So I've learned from them a lot of wonderful things about Italy. And I haven't visited all 20 regions of Italy yet, just to be really clear. So there's probably, I'm considering, where I'm going to be going next. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm always trying to plan, what I'm going to go visit next in Italy. On the top of my list is the island of Sardinia. And I think I interviewed this really fantastic sort of natural healer, sort of homeopath, fabulous woman named Jen, who moved her family. Her husband was originally from there, and they met in the United States, and they had a farm in Vermont, and then they sold the farm, and then they moved to Sardinia, and they have an incredible life in Sardinia. But Sardinia is kind of, there's only one touristy part of Sardinia, and it's called the Costa Smeralda, or the Emerald Coast. And that's where, real wealthy people, I think George Clooney has a home there. And it's kind of like where people with yachts, they go and they place their yacht there, and it's kind of their playground for the wealthy and the rich and the famous. But it's kind of like a place that's a little bit sort of under the radar, and only, it's not really on, it's not on everyone's radar yet, for sure. So besides that part of Sardinia, though, the island of Sardinia is a magical place, and I have not yet visited there. I've written articles about it. I've interviewed people from there, but I've not actually visited yet. So that's probably, if I was going to say what I'm most curious about, that might be the region of Italy that I'm most curious about, that I haven't yet visited. But from what I know about it, it's amazing, because it's like a microclimate, I think is what they call it, which means it has all these different types of regions. Like it has or topography. It's got a lake, it's got a desert, it's got mountains, it's got coastline, it's got all these different ecosystems. They even have wild horses, miniature wild horses that run wild there. And there's all these indigenous plant varieties, which of course excites me because I'm a horticulturist. And so there's of course a different language spoken there, which I think is called Sardi. And so they speak their own language, and they hardly consider themselves Italians. So if I was going to say an area that if you're wanting to go and be kind of an off the grid kind of person, and you're maybe you're a introvert and you definitely don't want to be around tourists, that might be about the most isolated you could possibly be and still be technically in Italy. So that would be one spot that I would say is definitely worth putting on your list. One of the regions that's kind of become popular in Italy is the region of Bari, I should say the region of Puglia, which the main city there is Bari, and that's kind of a hot spot. There's these little very unusual shaped architectural. They're kind of like ancient structures. They're called trulies. I don't know if you've ever seen those. Have you seen those, Chase? Yeah,
I have. Yeah. And Apulia was actually going to be my region that I was going to suggest. It's still a little bit under the radar. You continue, because you know better than me. I've been there once, but I really fell in love with it for probably some of the same reasons.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder on that, because I'd like I would like to hear your experience there too. I was thinking, when I was on the quest for which region do I want to own my farm in, I was definitely curious about that region. And I found some interesting things there. And I found one city in particular that I really, really loved and will definitely go back to. And it's in Puglia. There's a southern portion of Puglia called Salento. And in that area, in that kind of part of the region, there's a city called Castro, like Fidel Castro. I mean, for lack of a better reference. So it's not named after him, of course, but it's a city that I find that really only Italians know about. And it's really, really fabulous and worth a visit. And of course, that's on the Adriatic Sea. And
oh my God, this is gorgeous. I'm looking at pictures right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to all our Italian friends. We just ruined it for you. We've put Castro on the map and it is insanely beautiful. Oh my
You,
God.
you can rent a villa or an apartment or place there, and you can do it very reasonably. So you can stay there for a couple months. I stayed there for a month 1 year, and I just walked down these steep hills. I mean, you get an excellent exercise because there's a lot of steps, and there's wonderful restaurants. The food is absolutely incredible. Some of the best seafood I've ever had in Italy was in that little village, and it's a gem. It's
Yeah.
probably one of my favorite cities in Italy. Now, having said that, I didn't actually fall in love with that region. I was
Mm.
thinking, okay, I think I can love this. Maybe I could love this region. And so we went. And what I discovered there were a couple things I didn't like. And I didn't even know that this about myself, that I didn't like these things. I don't really like super flat areas. And I like hills and I like mountains. I like areas with like more of kind of a variation to the topography. And I found Puglia to be very, very flat and kind of hot. We were there in the summer, so it was kind of
Mhm.
flat and kind of hot. And I'm not a big fan of lots and lots of um, well, there was a lot of graffiti. And
Yeah.
I don't know, that bothered me. I don't know why, but I don't, I, there was a lot of graffiti. And the thing that really bothered me the most out of everything, though, about that region is unfortunately, there's a disease. Some of the oldest olive trees in the world and some of Italy's oldest olive trees are located in that region. And there's a disease that those olive trees got that was brought in by, they think it was imported by a house plant distributor that brought in plants from South America. They brought in this insect that started attacking, but the insect brought a pathogen of some kind, and that pathogen started killing these trees that were hundreds and hundreds of years old. So entire like swaths, as you're driving down the highway, on both sides of the highway are just acres and acres for miles and miles and miles of dead olive trees. And
Oh,
I couldn't
that's
take
so
it.
sad. Yeah, for you, I mean, with your background, like that is like dropping you in the middle of a horror film, you know? Like don't do that to me.
It really was. It really was. I couldn't take it. And
Oh,
I had to find out what was going on because I didn't know anything about that. It's like, why are all of these olive trees? It looked like a fire had gone through the grove of olive trees. It's the middle of like June, I think, is when we went down there. And there were no leaves on these trees. And these are massive trees that you couldn't even fit three people's arms around. I mean, that's how big the trunks were.
yeah.
And I found out that they've not got a cure for it, but they've figured out how to sort of keep it from spreading to all the rest of the trees in Italy because that's a huge problem. Because olive
Mm.
oil is a pretty big, and that was one of the biggest areas for producing olive oil in Italy. So that was a bad problem. So anyway, not to knock on Puglia. There's a lot of people that love Puglia. There's a lot of wonderful little villages in Puglia. There's some that have become extremely touristy, and I stumbled across a couple of those. And so I got out of there as quick as possible. But it's an interesting region worth visiting. But I definitely would go back to that city of Castro and spend another month there because it's so far it's not overrun by people. Let's see. I told you I was going to give you five, so that's two so far. I've already given you another one also, which is the Prosecco Hills. And if you've never
Yeah.
been to the Prosecco Hills, the Prosecco region, you got to be here at some point in your life. It's spectacular. And then we've already talked about the region of Trentino, which is up there in the mountains. And if you like apples, it's a wonderful place to go buy some of the most wonderful apples. My favorite apple of all up there is called an opal. apple, which is kind of a yellowish apple, and it's from Poland originally, and it's crunchy and sweet and delicious. Um, let's see. I think probably if I was going to say one final place, I think I think Umbria is a very
Yeah.
underrated region that I don't. It's one of the few landlocked regions of Italy, so there's no coastline in Umbria, but it's kind of like a less touristy um, Tuscany, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it borders Tuscany and it also borders Lazio, where we were talking about earlier. So
Yeah, I think I was kind of thinking you might love that because I think don't they call this Italy's like lung or something like that? It's like a farm. It's a lot of farmland. It's very green. As you said, not overrun by tourists, but you're bordering Tuscany and Lazio where Rome is, and Emilia Romana where you've got Bologna, and so you're kind of like positioned super nicely to get to a lot of stuff, but just kind of have this wide open space all to yourself in a lot of ways.
yeah, I haven't heard it called the lung of Italy, but that I'm not surprised. I There's so many different things that I haven't heard. Just because I haven't heard it doesn't mean it's not a thing. I learn more about this country with every passing day and week. So I've heard it referred to as the sort of the green heart of Italy. So again, a different
That
organ
might be
in the
it.
body.
I'm probably messing it up, to be honest. So I'm just
I
making up facts here.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. But it's a really great region, and there was a city that again you don't plan. I think one of the best things that you can do, and I'm sure anyone listening to this that loves travel can relate to this. I'm sure you can as well, Chase. And that is some of the best discoveries while traveling are the ones that you make accidentally.
Hmm. Yeah, 100% true.
Yeah, and that's what
I
happened
have.
with that city Castro we talked about, and then there's a city in Umbria that we were driving through. We weren't. It just happened to be we were tired and we needed a place to spend the night. And we went online and found that the nearest city was a city called Amelia. Amelia. I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, and it was just another delightful surprise. So that's now one of my favorite cities in the region of Umbria.
Fantastic. I love getting the insider knowledge. How many years have you lived in Italy now?
So officially living in Italy as a resident 4 years. I've been coming to Italy for like the past 20 years and started spending more time here about 10 years ago, but didn't really make the jump to Italy until 4 years ago. So
Okay. I mean, that's quite a bit of time. Like collectively, if we average that out, it's like you've been living there for like 12 years. So it's you have a lot of knowledge, and then you combine that, like your firsthand knowledge, and then you combine that with the fact that you've been interviewing all these people who have made the move to Italy specifically. Like with About Abroad, I'm trying to cover the whole world, and you've been hyper focused on this one incredible country that has so much diversity, so you've been able to learn a lot about this country, and I think there's something like super super cool about that, because you probably have a lot more, like as you just said, you just rattled off all these things that are common knowledge to you, but brand new information to me, and I've spent a good bit of time there relatively, and then for somebody that's never been, or has only been a time or two, that's super useful. So I'm glad you share, and I do also hope people will hop over, the About Abroad audience will hop over to your podcast to listen to even more, because I'm sure some interest has been piqued. And on that note, we probably should have started with this, but we just dove right in. I'm very curious to hear a little bit more about like your personal story, like how it came to be that you have this love affair with Italy and ended up moving here, coming from California. I think there was also a stop in New York along the way, and I know your partner's from there, so there's perhaps some reasoning behind that. But like, could you kind of give us the short-ish, no pressure to hurry, we're long form here, take the time you need, but but you don't have to go into every detail if you don't want to. But I'm just curious to kind of hear that, like how did this come to be?
Oh, wow. Okay, I'll try to make it as brief as possible. So when I was 21, I was studying architecture. I ended up going to school for landscape architecture, but I had to take a bunch of architecture classes. And one of our instructors he was an older man, and he loved Italy, and he liked to visit Italy every year. And so we kind of our group our class got to be kind of close to him, and I think he kind of liked us, and he's like, well, I'm going to Italy in, I think it was April, right after the semester was over. He's like, I'm going to be going to Italy, and you guys are welcome to join me. So a small group of us, completely separate from the school, we all decided to go to Italy with our architecture instructor, who was going to be traveling there anyway by himself. And so I that's probably the best decision I ever made. And so we spent a month, not just in Italy, but all kind of jumping around Europe, but a lot of time in Italy. And when I was in Rome, I was I was there with we were at a cafe or something with some of my friends, and we were there, and we were at this cafe trying to order some wine, and this man sitting next to us with his son was, I guess his mother was American. And well, I don't mean I guess. I don't know why I said I guess. So this man sitting next to us was American, meaning I guess I should say he was half American, because his mother was American, his father was Italian, so he could speak English. And he overheard us trying to order, and he just kind of started talking to us. And the next thing like what happens when you're traveling, we just kind of struck up this conversation, and he introduced us to his son, Alessandro, and he said, my son is getting ready to go to Scotland to study English. And this, of course, was before social media, which sounds like a long time ago. And so he was like, would you be willing to share email addresses with my son so he could email you guys and, practice his English with you? And so he said, sure. And so we all exchanged email addresses. And then we kind of, after the trip, we sort of stayed in contact a little bit, but then lost touch. And then, as social media, especially Facebook, especially in the early days, was pretty good about connecting people. And so we reconnected. I reconnected with Alessandro, and we just kind of just sort of became friends on Facebook. And then fast forward, I started a design company. So I was doing designs for events, but I was doing kind of green design, meaning I would use plant material and trees, and I would basically kind of transform inside spaces or tents or basically event spaces. I would sort of transform them into, like, feel like you were in a garden or feel like you were outside somewhere. And so that kind of became my signature thing. And I started doing that in California, in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And then I started doing more events on the East Coast in New York. I eventually was like kind of ready to get out of California. So I ended up moving to New York. And Alessandro saw that I had moved to New York, and he had gotten a job offer to be, interestingly enough, a really great job offer to be a professor at Columbia University in Manhattan, because he's a psychiatrist, and
Wow.
he has a couple PhDs in psychiatry. He's very, very intelligent, very, very humble, and very intelligent, and way more educated than I am. And so he's like, I see that you're living in New York now. I'm going to be coming to New York. Would you be willing to connect with me? And honestly, I had moved to New York to be single for the rest of my life. I had that was my plan.
Best laid plans.
Right. Now I had really done my best to try to, do what was going to make my family really happy, which was to, marry a nice girl and settle down. And I'd always dated girls, And I tried really hard to just sort of live in denial, but I had to finally like realize like that's not going to happen. I was engaged to this lovely girl, and I ended up having to call off the engagement because I was like, what am I doing? I'm lying to myself. I know I cannot marry a woman. That's not my story. But also I didn't ever picture myself marrying a man, even though I was finding myself much more attracted to that sort of that direction. And so I moved to New York, and I was just like, well, I'm just gonna be by myself. It's gonna be the best thing for me. And so within, I think, 6 months, Alessandro came to New York, and a year later we were married, which was the most shocking thing in the world I could have ever done. And it shocked everybody in my life, shocked my parents and my family a lot. And I'm pretty sure they're still in shock, actually. And so, but it was one of those things that I didn't overthink. I tend to have a tendency of overthinking decisions. And for some reason, this time I didn't. Like, we went down to City Hall, and we got married officially. Really, because if we hadn't, Alessandro was going to have to leave, and he was going to have to go back to Italy. And I was like, I know that we're meant to spend the rest of our life together, so why don't we just do this really quick? So we didn't really even tell anybody. We just went and got married, and then the next thing you know, we're spending more time in Italy, kind of going back and forth. And we went through the years of trying to get Alessandro to be a legal resident of the United States. And I didn't really plan on moving to Italy, but then when the pandemic hit, I started working like most people, started working remotely from home and started doing some things online. And so in 2020, at the end of that first year of the pandemic, I sold the house just outside of Manhattan in a little town called Nyack, New York. I sold the house, and we moved here to the Prosecco Hills we moved here to the Prosecco Hills of northern Italy, and it's been amazing. So that's kind of how I got to Italy.
Amazing story. I love how you had this plan to be single, and like then like hot Italian dude with a couple PhDs rolls in, and you're like, well, like I envision you like throwing the papers up in the air and just being like, that plan's gone. That's great. That's amazing.
Oh.
So and so
That's
with that,
exactly exactly how it was. That is exactly how it was, Chase.
like I can envision it in a cartoon form, and like that's what I see. It's just like, well, all right, screw it. And then like as a bonus, oh man, I gotta go move to Italy. Like this just keeps getting better. It's a very cool story, and I'm sure like ups and downs throughout, but like you've landed in an incredible situation. It seems you seem very happy, and again, you get to say you live in the Prosecco Hills, which again just is such a cool thing to me. With all of that, like I don't know how it works with marriages and being a foreigner and being able to come to Italy. Like, can you walk us through a little bit of from a bureaucratic standpoint, visa standpoint, like what was that like for you? Is there anything unique about your situation or anything that you could pass along that most anyone could use if they wanted to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, I mean, marry an Italian. That's the easiest way to get your
Sweet.
residency
Easy
or
enough.
citizenship.
Step one is move to New York. Step two, find an Italian professor at Columbia. Step three, get married. Yeah, okay. Easy enough. I hope you guys wrote that down. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's all there is to it. I mean, first of all, Italians are what's not to love about Italians? I mean, they're a wonderful nationality, ethnicity of people. It's a they're famous around the world for being warm and wonderful and family oriented and hot blooded, and it's all true. And they really are fabulous. I really do love the people here, and I've come to really, really feel grateful for being here. So when you marry an Italian, and I can't speak about necessarily what happens when you are from other cultures. It sort of depends on which country you're from, I know. But when you're an American marries an Italian, it's a pretty easy, straightforward process. All you really have to do is register your marriage in Italy. And even though technically our marriage, because we're not, the traditional man and woman marriage, which is those are the marriages that Italy really considers to be marriages. They have something in Italy called a civil. Basically, it's our kind of like the way we used to have civil unions in the United States. I think maybe there still are civil unions. It's basically kind of considered that it's your spouse, it's your legal spouse, your legal partner, and so you have to just you just have to register that marriage with Italy, and you have to get your marriage certificate and license. You have to get that translated, and then you have to, whichever town or comune, as it's called, the community where you're going to be living here in Italy, you have to get that sort of certified in that city where you live. And then you sort of go through the process of getting what's called the permesso di soggiorno, which is basically a permission to be a foreigner living in Italy. So basically a legal resident. And so that took, I don't remember exactly how long that took me because it was during the pandemic. And so everything was slowed down then. I think it was about an 8-month process from start to finish. Probably would have been much faster if it had been, during normal times. But you basically go and you get fingerprinted and you do the whole 9 yards. And then once you have that and you are a legal resident of Italy for a certain period of time, then you're eligible for citizenship. And what's interesting is, there's been a real sort of craze for people who are of Italian descent to move to Italy, and I completely understand why. If your grandparents or great grandparents, even some people, it's even their great great grandparents, anyone who was born in Italy basically after 1861 and never sort of like renounced their citizenship but moved abroad, and you're a direct descendant and you can prove that, then you can get your just through it's a lengthy process, but you can definitely do it. And so there's a lot of people that are doing that now because of their ancestry, and people from Brazil, people from the United States, Australia, because Italians moved all over the world. And so what people are doing is they're getting their Italian citizenship. But what a lot of people don't realize is just because you have Italian citizenship does not make you, does not give you the same rights as being an Italian resident. There's a big difference between being a resident of Italy and being a citizen of Italy. So I have elected not to become a citizen of Italy yet. I probably will do it in the future, but I haven't done it yet, mainly for tax purposes. Because one of the things, as you know, Chase, one of the biggest considerations when you're moving abroad is to consider your tax ramifications. So if you become a citizen of Italy, you are automatically considered a tax, your tax ramifications change dramatically. And so especially if you're spending any time here or living here and making any kind of money here, you're going to potentially have to pay taxes on that. So currently, I'm a tax resident of the United States. And even if you spend a majority of your time in Italy, you can still be a tax resident of another country, of your country of origin, so long as you can kind of prove that your businesses, your bank accounts, your financial life is mainly based back in your home country. So there's a whole bunch of things. So it's very different. So there's people that don't have ancestry, Italian ancestry, that want to become a resident of Italy. And there are visas that you can get. There are ways to retire in Italy. You just have to prove, how much money, passive income that you have every month, which for a single person is a little over $3,000 a month. If you can prove that you've got passive income, not through work, but through passive investments, meaning, whether it's rental properties that you own in your country or whatever, if you can prove that you've got enough monthly passive income coming in for investments or from your retirement income that qualifies, then you can get a residency here. When you get residency, you are entitled to full health care benefits. Whereas if you are a citizen, you are not necessarily entitled to health care and some of the other benefits of living in Italy.
Fascinating.
So it's a complicated process. And because I went through a version of that process and I've had so many people reach out, I've actually started coaching people on how to do whatever it is they need to do. There's also a new, I'm sure you're aware of this, Chase. There's a new nomad, they kind of quote unquote nomad expat visa that you can have, where you can basically get a visa that you can get for a year and then get it renewed if you want to be a nomad, sort of, working abroad, living in Italy. So every single person has a unique sort of approach, and very few people do what I did, which is to marry an Italian and get your citizenship that way, or your right to citizenship or your residency that way. So yeah, that's probably more
It's
information than you needed there, but
No, no, I think it's totally relevant, and it's what from the practical side of things. Like it's what people need to know. You hit on some very important points there, and Italy introducing the digital nomad visa kind of they've kind of created like a little bit of a jackpot situation, touching on the tiebreaker rule that you mentioned before, which can basically, you can prove that your center of vital interests are back in your home country. You don't necessarily you can be a resident of Italy, but not be a tax resident. This is a unique thing that Italy offers. It's in the tax treaty between Italy and the U.S., for example, and with many other countries. So this is not always the case in other countries. A lot of times, if you spend more than 183 days there, you automatically become a tax resident. There's a slight differentiation here. Little caveat: Nathan and I are not tax advisors, so do your own research, but this is just entertainment purposes only. But this is what some information we've stumbled across. And then they also have, I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but the other plan, which it used to be like you could get a 70 to 90% tax break depending on where you were living, and it was good for up to 10 years. They just changed it to 50% in 5 years. Do you remember the name of this, Nathan?
oh geez, I don't.
Yeah.
My tax expert, who I love I've had him on my podcast. His name's Paolo Rigo. So if you want to really know about some of the very specific laws and rules about taxes, which that's very true. I'm not an expert
Me
either
neither.
on. Paolo Rigo from Studio Rigo is one of the absolute best. He lives in the city of Veneto. He lives in the region of Veneto in the city of Verona, up here in northern Italy. He's wonderful. He speaks English, and he's the best. So if you really want to know about if you want to be guided through the process, he's excellent. I highly recommend him.
100%. Funny you mention him, because we're going to drop the link in the show notes. I've had him on the show. We talked about the program that I'm trying to reference right now, but I just can't remember the name of it at this moment. But anyway, we've got a deep dive on that program. Little caveat: that has, since that time, the program has changed. So the numbers are different and stuff now. So you have to go talk to Paolo to get him to help you with it. But this is all to say that, like, Italy was already a very attractive country. First of all, I think you should never move abroad for financial reasons or tax reasons or whatever. You should feel a calling to go there, and the tax part should be a cherry on top if there's a bonus. That's my personal opinion. People have their own opinions, whatever. But if you're going to go to a place, Italy's already a super attractive place. The challenges that people throw up often are bureaucracy, which you may just not be able to get around. It is bureaucracy. I think the red tape's there. Nathan, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it is quite bureaucratic, even compared to other European countries and other countries. Taxes are high, but they've got some programs to help expats and foreigners get around that, or at least minimize the pain there. And then the third was that there wasn't really a great way in if you didn't have a foot in the door like Nathan did. But now introducing the digital nomad visa, they do have that. So if you're just tuning into this episode for the first time, last week we did a deep dive on the digital nomad visa in Italy with our seasoned partner Lexity and their immigration lawyer in there in Italy. So we went through all the details in that episode. So go check out last week's episode if you want to hear more about that one. And then we'll also link to Paolo's episode for taxes. So you'll have like full coverage on all the stuff that I'm not smart enough to talk about. And we won't put pressure on Nathan to go deep on today either. But yeah, lots of useful stuff. I mean, I feel like it's funny. I left Italy a month and a half ago or so. And I'm really happy where I am right now. I'm sitting here in the Black Forest. I'm in a cool town here in Germany. I'm having a great time. But talking to you today, Nathan, I'm like, oh man, I miss that dolce vita. I'm missing Italy now. So you sparked that in me, and I imagine some listeners as well. So I say grazie for that, my friend.
Absolutely. Well, it's wonderful. That's wonderful. I didn't realize that you'd had Paolo on your show. He's fantastic. So yeah, definitely anybody who has questions about that, he's your guy. He is the guy. He knows all the specifics that I do not know, because I definitely tried to keep my hands out of the tax situation. And because I don't pay taxes in Italy at the moment, I can't really advise people, but I can definitely say he's your guy to talk to. So that's cool that you've had him on. But before I wanted to ask you a few questions too, if you have time before we go today.
Yeah, I do. I would love to. Please hit me with them.
So I know that you are interested in living in Italy, and do you have a sort of a timeline about when you might try to get back here? Are you kind of waiting on things to sort of shift in your life? How are things going with you for that?
So it's a great question, and it's I wish I had a good answer for you. The truth is, while we were in Italy, so I'll give you a little more context. Go back up a little bit. So, and this may be already known for people who listen to the show regularly. It'll be new information if you haven't, but definitely new info for you, Nathan. So we left. Moved to Spain almost 7 years ago. And after almost 5 years in Spain, we decided like, oh, let's confluence of events. Like it made sense to move out of our apartment, and we have a camper van, and we were like, hey, let's just go travel around Europe. We also got a new visa that allowed us to move out of Spain into another European country. It's called the EU Larga Duración in Spanish, and like the long-term residency European Union visa in English. So basically it just was like a change where we could only live in Spain before, but now we could move to another country. And we thought we're super happy in Spain. Valencia is like home away from home. We could stay here. But also like, let's go explore and see more of this beautiful continent in a deeper way. Let's go spend several months in places that we know we love. And so along the way, we stopped in several places that we knew we already liked. We had been through, but not like really spent a ton of time in for a long period of time. And always in the back of our mind, like, could these be places that we want to live? And when we got to Italy, to be honest, in my mind, I mentioned this earlier, but it was always a place that I thought like, I really like traveling here, but I don't know that I see myself living here. For whatever reason, that was just the case. Maybe it was the places I was going, but I think I always just felt like I was on vacation and it wasn't like real life. I guess that's how I would boil it down. And when we got to northern Italy, and actually like settled in there, I did feel suddenly like, man, this place kind of has like everything that I love. It's like super close to the Mediterranean. Like I had a moment actually like sitting there along Lake Garda where I'm like looking at this like alpine lake with snow-capped Alps in the background, surrounded by palm trees in like super sunny, warm weather, eating great food. Like people are out, it's lively. And I'm like, And I'm like 2 hours from the Mediterranean, 2 hours from the Adriatic, lots of cool cities like Venice and Florence and Bologna and Milan and Innsbruck, Austria, like all at my fingertips. And I'm going, why would I leave here? Like this is pretty perfect. So my wife and I started looking at, we were like, what if we wanted to call this home? So we started looking into that process. And that's about the time that you and I connected. And we thought it would be super easy. Like we thought like, oh, we have this visa, we just do it. And then we found out like, oh, there's all this bureaucracy you still have to go through. Even if I was a German citizen or whatever, like they would have to go through this process too. And Italy doesn't make it super easy. And they especially don't make it super easy with my visa. It's possible, but not easy. And so that friction, one, we ran out of time. We were like looking into doing it, but our time was up. We had to leave Italy. And two, because you still have that. That's a thing that I think a lot of people don't know is you still, even if you're like you're a resident of Italy. If you go to Spain, you're only allowed to be there for 90 days before you have to leave for 90 days. And you may know that. I didn't know that was the case. So we ran out of time, A, and then B, we've realized there's a lot more friction than we assumed. And I'm not sure if I have the stomach for it or not right now, like kind of over the bureaucracy and visa stuff. So it's a question mark. Like we're not sure. My heart is kind of there now, but I'm not sure if I feel like dealing with all the bureaucracy, to be honest.
Yeah, totally understand that. I think that a lot of people are in the same position as you, and they kind of love Italy, and they'd like to be able to be here. And so hopefully that, I know you'll figure out where you're supposed to be, and it'll all come together the way it's supposed to be. But yeah, that bureaucracy is no joke. It's not as easy as we would like it to be. That's for sure. Now,
Yeah.
another question I had for you was, so you travel with your wife and your dog Coda. So your wife is Allison, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So you travel with your dog through Italy. First of all, what's it like traveling with your dog all over Europe, not just Italy? And then how does your wife feel about this nomadic lifestyle? Does she love it as much as you do?
Man, you're a pro at the asking the right questions. So traveling with a dog is very complicated. A big dog too. Like he's a Siberian Husky. So there's challenges with that on multiple fronts, right? Like we pretty much have to drive everywhere. Like you can't just throw him in a plane. First of all, like dogs hate that. And secondly, it's just like complicated and expensive and you just don't do it. So we brought him from the US and like our intention is to never fly him again. But so that's challenging. It's also challenging because like a lot of like, so our current lifestyle for the last 2 years has been travel for a couple weeks in the van. Usually we like take most of that time off from work and we're like genuinely vacationing, traveling, but we might do some work along the way and then get to a place and rent an Airbnb for like 2-3 months. And that's been kind of the cadence for the last couple of years. And it's been a lot of fun. Like we've stayed in places like on the coast of France and up in the Austrian Alps, Swiss Alps, Italian Alps. We spent time in the Black Forest in Germany, all down the Adriatic coast and in Greece and the Greek islands. Like it's been magical in so many ways and like a dream, like honestly a dream come true in a lot of ways. And nobody is going to feel sorry for me at all. So I'm not asking for any sympathy, but it also is a bit exhausting. And like the paradox of choice is something that's like very top of mind. Like suddenly you have all the options in the world and you're kind of constantly spending your time analyzing those and figuring out what you want to do. And then you're not sleeping, some Airbnbs are better than others and it's not your place and whatever. Like I won't complain, but it's not all rainbows and butterflies is what I would say. Likewise, sharing a camper van when you're doing that is the people, whoever can live in a camper van with their spouse and throw in a big dog, like kudos to you, man. Like that's amazing. I'm not one of those people. Like a couple weeks, we're ready to get out of there and have our own space. So anyway, it's in summary, like I would say it has been a dream come true. And at the same time, there's a strong desire to kind of like settle down somewhere and be like, put this chapter behind us, I would say.
I totally get that. Thanks for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense. So what an adventure though. What a great chapter of your life. No matter where you go from here, you'll always have this incredible chapter and these wonderful memories. Well, I would have loved to have asked you a bunch more questions. You got me talking more than I ever do when I'm on the other side of the microphone. So bravo to you for that, because that was fun. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that you will be able to be on the I'm Moving to Italy podcast in a upcoming episode very soon.
I hope so as well. And I look forward to that. And I just want to say thank you again for all the info you share on your podcast, and like, just pulling out some of the stories that you have. It's very inspiring, and it makes, anybody that listens, like, do so with caution, because you're going to want to move to Italy. And so we're going to place the link to the show notes, or we're going to place a link to the podcast and the website and everything in the show notes. While people are listening, just go ahead and mention like where people should go to connect with you, learn more about the podcast and anything else you're doing. Again, these links will be in the show notes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can just go to immovingtoitaly.com. That's kind of the home base for the podcast. And then most of our listeners are either on Apple or Spotify. So there are links there to go to link whatever platform you listen on. You can find the podcast on any platform, but just immovingtoitaly.com is the podcast website. And then my website, where I do a lot of writing about different things related to Italy, and where I interview people and write articles about their experiences in Italy and Italian products and wine regions, everything. That's at allroadsleadtoitaly.com. So between those two websites, you can pretty much connect to my social media. I'm just Nathan Heinrich on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram. So yeah, it's all kind of right there, and you can definitely find what you need to find at either one of those sites.
Excellent. All right. Well, I hope the About Abroad audience will go over and check things out there and connect with you again. Like I love following along. So generally, I find that if you enjoy this show, you'll probably enjoy what Nathan is putting out there as well. So thank you again. I'm so happy we could make this happen. It was truly a lot of fun for me. And it's the reason that I love doing this podcast, because I get to connect with awesome people like yourself that are building incredible lives in incredible places. So this was, we'll count this one as a good day. And I'm glad we connected for it.
Well, thank you again, Chase. This was a delight, and I really, really appreciate the time. And I look forward to connecting with you very soon. And in the meantime, enjoy your time up in the Black Forest. Sounds beautiful up there.
Will do. All right. Grazie, Nathan. See you soon.
Take care. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us.